proven method. Before I ever allowed agents to work within the company, it was just myself. I was personally selling about 150 homes a year. So as we have brought them into our system, allowed them to work the methods in which I've worked for many years, and our average is about 30 transactions or 30 home sales per agent. We just teach them how to do it the right way.
Hey everybody, Bernie Gallerani bringing you another Bernie Gallerani Bootcamp. And what's going to be fun about today is the topic is action steps towards creating a 7-step plan of making $1 million, right? 7 steps to 7 figures. That's been our topic, and we'll continue with that topic for the rest of this year of 2025. And I have with me Miss Eleissa Brown on my team, who has been with us for
9 years.
9 years. Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So you know kind of everything about the system that has been created. Obviously, we all follow the Mike Ferry system, and I've done that for over 20 years. You've been doing it now for 9 years. And it's the one thing that I feel, Eleissa, anyway, that if they follow the steps and the plans of these 7 steps that we've laid out, that making $1 million a year, as you have done inside of the company, to a level of success that makes that happen, right? But it's not easy, right?
Nope. It's simple. It's just not easy.
It's a simple concept. It's just not easy to do it.
Yep.
So what is this, level of consistency towards our plan, right? Having a process of, we have a business plan, right? We obviously put together a plan. When do you normally put together your business plan?
Start working on it in October. Like to have that really locked in by October, November, so that you have a good ramp up period for the next year.
Okay. And that's fair. Why not January though?
Because by that time, you've already lost the momentum. What you do in October, November, December leads you up into the success and the momentum for the year ahead.
Yeah. And so for maybe those people now that aren't really hearing what she's saying, if you haven't started that early in October and you're just now getting these videos, start it now, right? You don't need to wait until October. Start working on that plan now and work that for the next 12 months. What will challenge people in as we move forward, coming towards the end of 2025, is to restructure that business plan for 2026. And we'll probably do that in October or November, probably at the latest. So obviously our goal is to build a business plan, right? And then follow it.
Yep. So
what do you think the biggest challenge is? Because writing the plan isn't always the most difficult part. That's probably the easy part. Staying consistent on that plan is always the biggest challenge. So where do you think agents find the most difficulty in following the plan that they wrote out, that they originally set for themselves, day 1, week 1, month 1, quarter 1? Where does the struggle come in?
Well, I think the hard part in our business is that this is not an instant gratification business. So a lot of times they'll put in 40 hours of work in a week, and then they'll get paid for it. In real estate, that's not the case, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes our gratification can be delayed a month, 2 months, 3 months. So that's why it's so important to start the business plan early, because what we do in October, we don't find comes to fruition until January and February. And I think that's the challenge with sticking to the business plan, is sometimes we work so hard and we stick to the plan and we do what we're supposed to be doing, but then we don't see the results right away. Mm-hmm. And then we get frustrated and we get discouraged.
You know what's fun in this conversation, and I think for people that are watching this, it's that we make a plan, but one thing we don't really take in consideration is having to change our behavioral pattern, right? Mm-hmm. So we have a certain pattern and we get excited on the plan and then realize we haven't really molded our behavior yet to cause that plan that we wrote out to fruition. Mm-hmm. Number 2, I think, is what you said, is no matter what your plan is, it still takes time to accomplish that, to see the results. I think probably 60 to 90 days of ramping it up over the next 60 to 90 days, which is why we do it in October, right? The beginning of October, is by the time we hit January, we want to have a lot of pendings on the board that we typically wouldn't have at the end of the year.
Right.
Talk a little bit about the difference in your business when you do have a tremendous amount of pendings where you're carrying stuff over into the new year because of the early start in the business plan. And then how has that changed your business for the rest of the year versus waiting until January 1st to then start that plan?
Well, I don't know about other people, but to me, if I start the year off with a good amount of pendings and I have that momentum into the year, I'm able to then look at my business plan and say, okay, I want to sell, let's just say 100 houses. I've got 12 on the board, which means that I have whatever that is, 88 left, right?
We're doing math.
Math is hard. Good thing, thank God for calculators. And so it's a lot more attainable for me when I'm able to see that I have that momentum going into it.
Yeah.
Versus before, when I think back to the early years, the first couple of years, I'd run. And then by December, I was tired. So I take some time off. And then going into January, I had one pending. Man, that felt really discouraging to know that I had this huge uphill battle to climb and I hadn't even started. Yeah. So to me, I think the momentum going in the year just gave me that encouragement of knowing, hey, I'm already part of the way there. I just need to keep pace.
Yeah. Gosh, it's so great. But so where do you then take time, right? Because every agent wants to celebrate their levels of victory throughout the year. A lot of agents believe, obviously, that the end of the year is the worst time to sell. You and I would have a whole different argument on that, right? I actually think it's one of the better times of the year, October, November, December, where a lot of agents stop working. Maybe we succeed at such a high level in the last part of the year because all the other agents are taking that time off.
Yes.
Right? So how do you take some time somewhere in that fourth quarter to celebrate your year, or do you stay most focused during that fourth quarter?
I really like to stay focused because there's a lot less competition with agents because a lot of people are taking time off and there's a lot of motivated people. I remember even just this past Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, I hit the ground running and I think I put like 12 under contract in 2 weeks. So there's a lot of business to be had. And when there's not a lot of agents to service it, it's amazing what you can find. So I think the most important thing that I've found with taking time to either relax, reset, celebrate is as long as it's scheduled.
Scheduled and planned.
And planned. Yeah. That is really the most important thing, because if you go until you're just dead, then you're taking unplanned time off and then it's interrupting the schedule. But if you can really schedule it, know when you're going on vacation, properly prepare, then you can hopefully come back into some momentum. So that's what I found is really the most helpful.
You just touched on something that is part of this conversation that we're going to have today in regarding to staying consistent within the plan that has been set. Mm-hmm. And I have noticed in most agents that we've worked with here inside the company, and some of the agents in which I've coached outside from the Mike Ferry organization, that staying consistent on the schedule they have written is the biggest challenge I think any agent has, right? Would you agree that that's probably one of the biggest challenges you have?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you mentioned something about planning your vacations or planning your time off, right? And so what we do when we build business plans, one of the things Mike Ferry has taught us for years is that once we build our plan and the days that we're going to work, we also need to focus on days that we're going to fall short of our goal. So in other words, write in, for example, if you have 200 days that you're working or 250 days that you're working, take 10% of that and wipe that clean and say, you know what, I am allowed to screw up, let's just say 10% of the time, where I don't show up to work or I don't make my calls, I don't hit my contacts, whatever it might be, right?
Emergency. The dog has to go to the vet, the kid's sick.
Yeah, nobody ever thinks of that, right? Yep. And that's the interesting part is there so much that you're not thinking is going to happen that is going to happen, and that if you have that built in, which is what Eleissa just said, if you have that built in, it kind of gives you a little of that. But what we find is people exceed that, right? I mean, they find more reasons not to show up. And remember, since we're staying consistent here, the challenge is how do you overcome those things? So let's say you've written a plan. Let's just call it January 1st for the purpose of this conversation. And you're excited about your plan. You go to work. And then there's days you don't feel like it. There's days that you come up with creative avoidance issues where you're like, I got to go do this. How do you combat that?
I think you always have to stay focused on the goal. To me, breaking it down into a quarterly and a monthly goal has really helped make it a little bit more achievable, because to me, when I look at the yearly goal, I sometimes get overwhelmed and I kind of retreat because I realize, oh man, that's a really big goal. But if I break it down into a quarterly and a monthly goal, to me, it's a lot easier to, there's only one way to eat an elephant. That's one bite at a time. And so to me, that's my bite. So if I break it down, I look at my monthly goal, I realize, I really don't want to go into work today. Oh, but you know what? I only have to take 3 more listings to hit my goal by the end of the month. to me, that's a lot more ammunition than saying, oh man, I still have to sell 52 houses to meet my goal.
Do you feel though, because you said, well, I don't feel like doing this today. If you were an employee, let's say, right, because you're obviously an independent contractor, but if you're an employee and you don't feel like it, then what happens?
You don't get paid.
You don't get paid, right? And so you probably still have to come in, or you're only going to get so many sick days, right? Or you miss too many days, right? You're probably going to get let go. So how do you talk yourself into, because you're goal driven, and I appreciate that about you. And I think you focus really on the end result, which is accomplishing your goal for the year of 2025. Do you talk yourself through that? Like, because it's easy to, because you say, well, I haven't hit my goal yet this year, or I haven't hit my goal yet this month. But what are the days when that doesn't convince you? When you're not convinced by that conversation, then what do you do?
Well, I think having built-in accountability is really important. So the things that you have to do every day, have accountability for that, whether it's someone making sure that you show up to the office, or if you know that you don't have the internal accountability needed to get you there, then have an external accountability. I have an accountability right now to take a certain amount of listings, or I pay someone a lot of money. And man, when I'm not wanting to go take a listing, or I'm like, I took most of them this month. Guess what? I don't want to write that check. So I'm going to go ahead and take that other listing.
You know, it's cool. Like, okay, so your goal this year is 115 homes sold, right? And last year, I think you sold 90. Is that right?
Yes, 90.
90. Okay. So when you look at the difference between your 90 that you did last year and you're tracking for 115 now at this point. So when you look at the difference in that goal that target you had last year at 90, and then the goal you have today for the year of 115, what has changed in your approach and your consistency and your attitude to see the difference in that? Because you're very skillful. So I wouldn't say your skill is probably much different. So what is it?
It's my mindset. Just, I think being committed to the goal and then knowing that I have the tools necessary to get there. I think to me, it's all little mindset shifts. Once you know the skills, once you know what to do and you have the conversations, it's all about just how do you get your mindset right every day to keep you moving forward towards that goal.
So when you're looking at these new folks that you see come in the building and you see them inconsistent, because a lot of them have that, right? Because they're fighting their old self. I know you don't really coach them and you probably just observe them. But what is your thoughts that go on into your mind when you see brand new people who are struggling to follow the system? Because it is a system, right? I mean, there's a process that makes not just an agent make, a lot of money, but we're talking about 7 figures here, right? It's a very disciplined human being. There's not a lot of steps. Like I said, there's 7 steps to this program, but each one has to be done at a high level. And so when you see the agents that come in and you've been in that new seat, you've walked in that door and you've had to learn those scripts, and then you see them struggling, what's your thought?
I think it's tough because in the environment that I started with you were still in production. So I was really grateful to see you in that day-to-day life of being the first one in the office, doing your prospecting, going on appointments, coming back, prospecting. So I had the model opportunity to see you doing it. And I try to carry that on into, people that come in here. But I think that that's the hard part is we had such a great role model to see that being done that I just tried to emulate that as best I could. And then I think when people don't take the opportunity to see, okay, these are what the successful people are doing. Unfortunately, it just seems that the lack of commitment is kind of what leads them to think, oh, I can work from home, or, oh, I don't need to be in the office so much, which can you be successful doing that? I guess. But the one thing that we know is that the people that come in consistently and do it consistently are the ones that are making the most amount of money.
Well, and I think we have to really roll into what success really means. And for me, and you've known me for a lot of years, and that I believe that real estate is the greatest opportunity for an abundance amount of wealth if you do it the right way. But the industry itself doesn't. I mean, are we a little unusual based on how we work, right? We're unusual in the real estate business. We're not unusual in the business world. Only the real estate business can get, and I love Mike Ferry, who's been our coach and mentor for over 20 years. And he says the real estate agents are the most unusual people in regards to how they focus. They have lack of focus. As real estate agents, most agents have a lack of focus. So with that being said, what do you feel is the difference between somebody who actually says, I get it, I'm moving forward, versus a majority of them who say, I kind of want to do things my way? Like what's the difference in that personality or that drive that person has?
Well, as you and Mike say, it's drop the E and go.
Yeah, drop the
right?
ego, yeah.
So the difference between ego and actually moving forward is you have to get out of your own way. I think the benefit of starting so early on in my life and my career is that I didn't know any better. So I truly just had to have blind faith. I had no idea what I was doing, and I just took a leap of faith. I blindfolded myself and I said, okay, where do you want me to go? And I tried to be as coachable as I could, and it turned out pretty well.
Do you remember, like, I think it was your first year, maybe your first 6 months, and you and Kylie were out knocking on doors, right? And you guys would go do that every day. Yeah, it didn't matter like what the weather was. You were out there, and you'd basically say, well, I'm going to go knock on doors. I'm like, okay. And it's something we always preached and taught was you have to go out and do what others aren't willing to do, because you'll have the results that others only wish they could have. And so you really were very coachable. However, you still are a human being that has challenges in fighting your old self. Do you think your age at that time, because you were 20 when you started selling real estate with us, do you think your age was an advantage because you really didn't have a lot of preconceived ideas because you were so young, or the disadvantage for you?
I think it was both, but I think more so an advantage because, like you said, I was not pre-molded, right? So I was kind of just that pliable Play-Doh for you to be able to say, okay, do this, do that. I think the only disadvantage was maybe my lack of life experience, which obviously I'm still gaining every day. Mm-hmm. But I think for the coachability part of it, my age actually was a positive. So for those that are kind of getting into the business, I'd say try to find a mentor that you can trust, that if you take their guidance step by step, you'll be successful, and just try to be as coachable as possible, because that will lead ultimately to the success that you're looking for.
That's good. Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions. Of course, you don't know the questions I'm going to ask you, but I'm going to ask you questions. We're talking about going in consistency. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to bring some challenges to you here, and I want you to tell me ways you felt like you dealt with the challenge that came about, okay? So I think you've already answered one of them today, but I'm going to ask it again. We highly promote the idea of coming into the office early, before 8 o'clock in the morning, right? And I think you always got here at what time typically?
Between about 7:30.
7:30, okay. So challenges with creating the discipline to getting up early and in the office by 7:30. What was the biggest challenge you had?
I mean, I've always been an early riser, and I saw that it worked for you, so I just did it. I think really the aha moment for me was when I tried to fight the system and maybe some days come in later, realize how much more difficult it was to get done what I needed to get done in the time I needed to get it done. Yeah. That I then realized, okay, I can't do this. So for me, it was more doing it the right way and then deviating from it to realize the value versus the other way around.
That's good. So you kind of had to learn that process and realize that there was some difficulty in there for you.
Yeah.
All right. So the next thing then is we promote talking to a lot of people, making a bunch of contacts. Mike Ferry has always told us that which number is greater, the people we know or the people we don't know. And obviously that answer is the people we don't know is the number that's greater. And since we're in the connecting buyers and seller business, we need to get in front of a bunch of people, right? So here's my question. Contacts. Your goal when you first started was to make how many contacts, if you can remember?
Between 30 and 35 a day. Yeah.
Okay. And then how did you deal with a lot of those days? I know that came up where you're like, I only got to 15 or only got to 12 or only got to 20 or whatever it might be. How did you fight that?
I knew that it was as you say, it's a contact sport, right? So the more people I talked to, the more experience I was gaining, which was my whole goal in the beginning, was just how do I get exposed to more people? How do I get involved in more experiences? And so I knew that the more people that I talked to, it was just another opportunity to learn. And again, having that built-in accountability, because there was a lot of days where I didn't want to do it, but making sure that I had the accountability with people so that on the days that I felt like, well, I made 20, what's an extra 5 or 10, really made sure I did it, because it's that accumulation effect.
In our days, and I don't know how you work it today, but early days, we'd track all of our numbers, right? All of our contacts. You'd have to put those contact daily goal or contact number in your number analyzer.
Yes.
How tough was that for you to put in contacts that you knew were not the minimum standard for yourself, but yet you allowed yourself to cheat yourself, sort of, right? I'll use that word. What kind of weight did that put on you for really saying I'm committed to doing 25 or 30 contacts, and yet you were repeatedly at times doing less and knowing that you were really just being dishonest with yourself?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, but I think it's easy to renegotiate certain things with yourself. And I think contacts, prospecting time, sometimes we can renegotiate. We can come up with excuses. Oh, well, I had to deal with this, or, oh, I had to deal with that. So that's not really, I think, the biggest issue. But the biggest issue is then when you're not getting the results, you're not getting the contracts or the deals or the closings, you're then wondering, well, I'm doing all the work. Why am I not getting the deals? Mm-hmm. But it's when you go back and look at all of those little steps that you missed, then you realize, oh, okay, that was the problem.
Yeah. And what's cool, it's fun in coaching people like her or people that really are trying to cheat themselves a little bit. And I cheated myself too. So I know we all do it. Yeah. And it's really good when you figuring out, okay, well, I'm selling a house for every 50 people that I talk to. And then we take those contacts and we write them into, let's say, a month. And you're going, okay, well, had you made 1 or 2 more contacts than you did, you would have made an additional 5 or 6 or 7,000. So let's call it 5,000. And you do that for 12 months. That's $60,000. You just robbed yourself because you kept on renegotiating with yourself, right? And it's very common in our business, and especially for realtors, to renegotiate. Let's talk about distractions. Mm-hmm. So you're new. You have a lot of different kind of distractions than when you're successful and you have a lot of other distractions, a little bit different kind of distractions. So we find that when agents have any sort of level of success, they sell 1 house, 2 houses, 3 houses, whatever it might be, or they pinned 1 house, 2 houses, 3 houses, that they find every reason in the book to pick up the call when an agent's calling them, when we say, let that wait till after 12 o'clock. How did you handle that? Because you were successful early. You had a lot of stuff going on early. How did you manage that, what we would call creative avoidance issues? What kind of conversations did you have with yourself?
I definitely had to learn the hard way because I was very much a control freak, as you know, right? So I always wanted to control the deal. I wanted to control everything that was happening in the deal. So I had to learn the art and the importance of delegation. And as you get busier, allowing additional help. Thankfully, you give us the resource of wonderful closing coordinators and TCs. And so being able to leverage that in addition to just trying to get those distractions away from your prospecting time, because that's what you're talking about, right? Is between 8 and noon, that's your money-making time. How do you create a safe environment where there's no distractions? And I think for my personality, it was really easy because I just made sure that everybody around me knew, unless it's an emergency, don't bother me before noon. So that included coworkers, which everybody knew when I came into the office, don't bug me, don't come chit chat with me. I'm here to work. But that also included my family. They knew that before noon was money making time. So unless there was an emergency, hey, don't call me, don't text me. That's for later on. And so I think creating those boundaries and setting that expectation.
Gosh, it's interesting though, because that is the way we teach it. Mm-hmm. And yet we're human beings and there's times we don't want to prospect, right? Yeah. So there's a day you're in there, you're prospecting, you're like, I'm not really feeling it today, but I know I have to do it. Gosh, this phone rings. It's this agent on this deal that I've either presented an offer on, or it's a deal that I already have an offer on and it's going to close. How hard is it for you to fight picking up that phone during that prospecting time?
Some days it's hard, and some days if I know that that's the day I'm having and I'm looking for a distraction, what systems do I have in place to make sure that I limit those distractions? Putting your phone on do not disturb, not pulling up your emails and checking them during your prospecting. So what safety measures are you putting into place? How aware are you that you're going to let those distractions creep in? And then what safety measures are you putting into place to prevent that? Because I think it's about self-awareness.
I've always said, and I don't mean this to be, I mean this as a loving way, as you've been different than most because you've always been focused. And so I can have different conversations with people sitting in these chairs where they're going to elaborate on all of the distractions they allow in their life, right? You've not really had a lot of those problems, which is why I wanted to talk with you about it, because I know everybody struggles with it. You've just been a little bit more focused than most. I guess my thought on this is you focused a lot on your ultimate goal, meaning I want to go out and succeed at the highest level I possibly can. And yet you still challenged yourself, or still were challenged with this process of still figuring out how hard is this going to be to me actually hit my goal. And I think that is where most people fall short, is they don't realize how difficult it is to achieve 100 transactions a year or making a 7-figure income. Do you believe that anybody can do it?
Absolutely. I'm not anything special. I'm not a natural born salesperson. I don't, have any kind of special training or anything. If I literally could just walk in here, copy and paste basically what you've told me to do, and I don't even do it 100% of the time. Let's just say I do it 75% of the time and can achieve a certain level of success. I promise you anybody can do it as long as you follow the right steps.
All right, this will be fun, because some people have said, well, gosh, I couldn't even imagine having, right now you're carrying 22 pendings. Is that right?
23.
23. Okay, congratulations. You must have pinned another one since yesterday. So she's carrying 23 pendings. And so we're going to go back to early days and move forward now 9 years. I hear a lot going, well, I don't even know how I can handle 6 or 7 pendings when 3 are driving me crazy, right? Or 3, I'm just so busy, I don't know what to do with all my time, or how to juggle all my time. So did you work harder in the first 2 years? Have you, time-wise, like think about your first 2 years, because I remember those years, and then the last 2 years. Where did you work harder, the first 2 or the last 2?
The first 2.
Okay, so the first 2, so your first year you sold how many homes?
25, I think.
Okay. The second year approximately?
I think it was about the same. I think I dipped back a little bit, 24 maybe.
Okay, so let's just call it 25 each year. Okay, so and then last year you sold 90, and then this year you're on pace for 115.
Yes.
And what you just said was you worked harder to do your first 2 years to sell 25, to working now, we'll call it 100, to sell 100 homes a year. How does that work? Like, how do you work harder in 2 years when you start selling considerably 75% less business than you have today? How does that work?
Well, you use the analogy of stretching a balloon, right? So in the beginning, your balloon is very small. It's never been inflated before. And then you kind of give it the first blow, and then it's out to here, right? And it's like, oh man, I'm feeling stretched. I've got 3 deals and I'm stretched pretty thin. So then, okay, I deflate back down, and then you got to inflate it a little bit more. And then, okay, it stretches a little bit more and a little bit more. So every year your flexibility or your balloon can stretch a little bit more. And so I work smarter, not harder these days. And I think that I've now have a certain level of business maturity that allows me to have more enjoyment with what I do too. There's a lot of stress involved in those first 2-3 years, trying to just figure things out, learning a new craft. So once you get all those basics under your belts, then it's just more of a small tweaks here and there to continue growing versus the initial blow up of the balloon.
Yeah, I think you're trying to convince yourself whether it works. Even though you saw it, you're still testing yourself.
And I think the difference for me was that it kind of had to work. Like, I didn't have any other options. And so a lot of times if people give themselves the option of figuring out, is this going to work? Is it not? Then 9 times out of 10, you're going to find the reason why it doesn't. But I have found that the agents that don't give themselves the option and they have to make it work, they do.
Well, and that's probably another video we should do on the pain threshold of paying bills and how much an individual is willing to commit. Because we have found for years that if the agent is the breadwinner and they're committed, they're always going to be successful. And if they're not the breadwinner, now in your case was unique, but if they're not the breadwinner in that family, very rarely will they ever succeed. And people go, well, why is that? Well, there's probably a lot of reasons. There's a whole probably other show, but it's interesting to watch your journey, because when you started, you were living at home with your mom and dad in a bedroom that you didn't have to pay rent for, right? And so what I love about how unique you were is you were so determined, and yet you didn't really have to make a lot of money, right? You could have just made a little bit of money and been a young 20 or 21-year-old making $100,000 or $200,000 a year, and probably been the richest group of friends that were in their early 20s, right? Earning like that. But you didn't look at things that way. You looked at things as like, how far can I actually take this business? And your life's just kind of beginning, where your financial picture is very bright. Your retirement can be pretty much at any time you want it to be. I looked at this when I started. I was 38 when I started in the business. And by the time I was 50, I realized that I had a lot of options. And having to work was not one of those options. And so you get to a point, and you're going to be a decade behind me in regards to your financial picture and what you can build in wealth. Where do you see yourself now? Because you've really conquered a lot of things that we try to teach the agents. How far away from your ultimate goal are you?
I think the thing that I've learned, if you were to ask me that question, 9 years ago, I'd say if I could get to the point of 100 deals, making a good amount of money, that would be the goal.
Yeah.
Now, through the years, I think what I've learned is that I have enough business maturity to realize that you have to change as a person to get to that next level, that you're never there. And so to me, it's really exciting to see what I've been able to accomplish in 9 years. And so this is maybe something that we need to work on, but I think it's almost hard for me to envision what the next 10 years is going to look like, because I've already been able to do so much more than I thought I could do, that then thinking about the next 10 years, I mean, it's really whatever I can put in my mind. And I think I have some challenges doing that, because it really can be so many different things.
Yeah. And I think you and I have ventured into different groups and conversations where we start to realize that we're really not that big of thinkers, and that there's a lot of really powerful, successful people out there. So something I was challenged with by my coach years and years ago is, he had asked me a question, and he said, how much do you feel you're going to need in your retirement? And I'm going to say this was, let's call it 12, 13 years ago. Okay. And he says, how much do you think you're going to need in your retirement? And so I gave him the number, and he goes, really? God, I'm surprised. He goes, just so you know, you're going to need at least twice that. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness. Like, I couldn't even fathom the number I spit out. Right. Forget about the number he spit out, right? And he goes, no, you have to understand something. He says, if you think about it and you focus on it, it will show up. But what's fun is, as long as it took me to get my number, it took me less than half the time to get his number. You follow what I'm saying? Yep. And what you start to realize is there is a real thing called an accumulation effect. And when you start accumulating the process of knowledge, work ethic, discipline, it then ultimately pays off tenfold in time, which is what you just said, as you put in a lot more work in 2 years than you did the last 2 years. And that's because of this accumulation effect, right? So you got a bunch of people watching this video. And what would you say here in closing, that if somebody's listening to this, they're struggling, they hear 7 figures. And by the way, and I'll just tell everybody here, I thought 7 figures, 7 steps, 7 figures would be a great idea. And I've realized that it's so out of the realm of how most people think. I probably had the wrong topic, but I'm going to stick with it for 2025, because people they're trying to pay their bills. Yeah. They're trying to figure out how they pay their rent, how they pay their mortgage payment, how they pay their car payment, how they feed their children, how do they balance out their family life, right? And their spouse, and spending time with their spouse. All these same principles apply regardless of the level of financial success you want to have. They all apply. So what advice would you give somebody who's hearing this? They might be selling 0 houses a year. They might be selling 20 houses a year, but they want to change. They want to be better. What advice would you give them?
I would say to keep watching things like this, have a really great mentor, again, that you trust. I mean, just like what you said. I mean, if you would have told me 9 years ago, okay, I made $100,000 my first year, but that I could make $1 million in this business, I'd almost say, I don't want to, because I don't want to work 10 times harder than what I just did to earn $100,000. But what I really realize is that you don't have to work 10 times harder. As we just talked about, is actually easier, but you just have to keep taking those steps along the way, and you make 100. All right. That was hard. but I can do it. Then you make 200. All right, that was a little bit better. Then you make 5, and then you make 7, and you keep going. So you just have to cross those thresholds. So just know that it's possible. I promise you anybody can do it, but you just have to find the right coach, the right mentor, the right system, and you just have to be consistent and just plug along. And I promise as you cross those different thresholds, you'll realize it's really not as hard as you thought. And then sure enough, you'll be able to get somewhere, look back and realize, man, that was pretty cool. Now what?
Yeah. And you know, what's great about what you said is like, it always seems like a daunting task in the beginning. And I'm fortunate enough to have owned or do own a couple of different businesses here. And every time you enter into something new and unfamiliar, I remember one I got into years ago, and Mike Ferry was telling me that, hey, listen, you just got to really focus on this. And it took me, he was probably talking to me about it for 3 or 4 years. And he basically was saying, I don't understand what's holding you back. And I'm like, I just don't know how to do that. And he's like, what does that have to do with anything? Right? Go figure it out. Right. And so I love your advice, because I would just say to everybody, if it seems like it's the unknown, you're like a little bit scared of making a commitment, or, you know, you don't really understand the step by step, just do a step, one step, write out a business plan, and then start following one of those things on the business plan, and then work to perfect that one skill. And it might be getting up every day and showing up at the office at 7:30 or 8 o'clock and stay consistent. And then, you know, you might, next goal might be saying, hey, I want to make 20 contacts a day. I'd say, well, why don't you just make 5 or 10 and stay consistent with 5 or 10, then maybe move to 12 to 15, and then try to get to 20. And then eventually what you'll do is you'll get to, you know, 40 or 50 or 60, because we have days where we'll have 100 contact days, right? Where you'll make 100 contacts in a day. That's exhausting. But you know what? I know agents that did 100. My friend Eric, who you and I both know, he made 100 contacts every single day, 5 days a week, and did it for years. And by the way, just so everyone knows, he sold almost 1,000 houses. People, and I love realtors, right? Well, he must have had a big team. Yeah. No, it's like, by the way, when I was selling 150, 200 homes a year, and you'd hear agents go, well, he's got to have a big team. He's got a big team. Nobody can do that. No, I did that actually by myself, selling 150 houses. You can do it. I know people that sell 300 houses by themselves, and it really takes not even all that much skill as it takes a level of discipline. And the question I guess I'd have for anybody is, do they have the discipline for it? So I want to thank you. And I know I get to utilize you a lot in these kinds of things, but your story is so great. And I think you inspire a lot of people by what it is that you do. So I just want to say thank you for taking the time to spend this with me today, and also for all the times that you spent with me in the past, and also all the times you spent with me in the future. But of course, I want to say thank you for that, and thank you all. And if you guys have any questions or comments, please let us know. Go to Bernie at BernieGallerani.com and send me a quick email, and I'll answer any questions you guys have. Everybody have a great day.